the failure of Superman 4, we had to wait for another 20 years for another Superman film to be made. Before Superman Returns, the comic books in the late 80s and early 90s were hit or miss, and the Superman comic book sales were declining. But once Superman was killed off, the sales of the Superman comic books went up, surprisingly. In the 90s and early 2000s, Superman was doing very well on TV shows like Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman with Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher as Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Bruce Timm, the same man who did the 90s Batman animated series, did a Superman animated series. And there was also a Superboy TV show in the early 90s. In the 2000s, Smallville was a coming-of-age TV show about Clark Kent in his teenage years before he grows up to be Superman, which made Superman very popular around that time period in the 2000s. And that show came out 1 month after 9/11. Before Superman Returns, in the 90s, Tim Burton, who had directed 2 Batman films prior, was going to direct a Superman movie, with Nicolas Cage as Superman, and Kevin Smith was going to write the movie. But unfortunately, this film was never made. In 2015, there was a documentary interviewing comic book fans asking them their own opinions on how this movie could have turned out and why the movie was never made. In my opinion, it could have been interesting, but at the same time, we'll never know how this movie could have turned out because it was never made. I highly recommend you go check out the documentary, The Death of Superman Lives and What Happened. In 2006, we finally got a new Superman movie, Superman Returns. Superman Returns was directed by Bryan Singer. Bryan Singer, as you all know, directed movies like The Usual Suspects, Stephen King's A Pupil, Valkyrie, and the X-Men movies. And we all know he's a real piece of shit for what he did. It was produced by John Peters, Gilbert Adler, and Bryan Singer. Again, piece of shit he is. The story was written by Michael Dougherty, if I'm saying his name right. Michael Dougherty also directed horror movies like Trick or Treat, Krampus, and he recently did the last 2 Godzilla movies, King of the Monsters and King Kong vs. Godzilla. And Dan Harris, who both did the screenplay. And thankfully, but not Singer. The movie stars Brandon Routh, Kate Bosworth, James Marsden, who played Cyclops in the X-Men movies, Frank Langella, Eva Marie Saint, Parker Posey, Cal Penn, Sam Huntington, and Kevin Spacey. Again, just like Bryan Singer, Kevin Spacey is another piece of shit garbage. Superman Returns is about Lex Luthor wanting to destroy Superman. Superman returns after a 5-year absence in a different world. Lois Lane has moved on with her life. She's engaged and has a son. Lois Lane wrote an article on why the world does not need a Superman. This upsets Superman. He tries to find a way to connect with Lois. And he tries to find his place in the world again after the world survived Superman for 5 years. I was 12 years old at the time when this movie came out. I saw this in the movie theaters when it came out with my father. And honestly, when I saw this in the movie theaters, I was not impressed. I was let down and disappointed. The year before Batman Begins came out, I was satisfied, excited, walking out happy, and could not wait for more. Whereas this movie did not do that much for me. Also, around this time, being a Superman fan at the time, having read the comic books, watching the Christopher Reeve movies, the 50s TV show, and I was also a huge die-hard Smallville fan around this time period. Smallville gave me hope that this movie was going to do well. After seeing this movie, I moved on, and I rarely rewatch this movie on rare occasions, and I can't remember the last time I rewatched this movie until recently. But for this movie review, I sat down and rewatched it again, and honestly, I feel the same way as I did back in 2006 when I first saw this movie. I'll admit, the movie's not really bad or terrible, and I don't hate it. I find it boring, not interesting, and forgetful and dull. It's a Superman movie that I've never gone back to rewatch over and over again, not the same way I rewatch the Superman Christopher Reeve movies. To me, it's a movie they had no idea on whether they wanted this movie to be a sequel or a reboot. The problem is, Bryan Singer made the movie more of a tribute spiritual sequel instead of making Superman his own thing. He basically was copying what Richard Donner did already. I feel like Bryan Singer was being lazy with this movie, to be honest. This movie shows how he has admitted that he has never been a comic book fan, and yet Singer directed good X-Men movies. During the making of X-Men The Last Stand, he left during production of that movie because having disagreements with 20th Century Fox and how he wanted to make the movie darker. The studio would not allow him to do that. Instead of directing X-Men The Last Stand, he optioned out of X-Men The Last Stand and chose to direct Superman Returns instead. Kind of sounds similar to like Richard Donner in some ways. Or maybe like Tim Burton, what he did for like Batman Returns after that. Brandon Routh was an okay Superman, but he's no Christopher Reeves. At the same time, he was trying to make Superman his own, and that's a lot of pressure and shoes to fill in. I know he came back as Superman on a TV show, but I don't know like which one it was though. Kate Bosworth, I like her as an actress, but I honestly did not think she was not a good Lois Lane. When she wrote the article on why the world's not needed a Superman, when I saw this as a kid, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Do you want to make a list of all the times Superman was there to save the day, or like in other comic book and movie versions? She also looked way too young to be playing Lois Lane. She looks like a teenager. They're also like way off with her age in this movie. This is in the same continuity as the first two Richard Donner Superman movies. Shouldn't like Lois Lane be in her 40s or something like that at this point? I don't know why, for some reason I did not like the idea of the fact that Lois Lane has a son and was getting married. And it was an interesting twist that the kid could have been Superman's son. Again, for some reason I did not find that part interesting. Wish her son could have been maybe her fiance's son. Also, why did she bring her son while she was going to an investigative reporting job? Would it have made sense to get a babysitter for her son so that way her son's life was not at risk and jeopardy? Kevin Spacey's Lex Luthor was okay. Nothing special or great, a little more intimidating and darker compared to Gene Hackman. He was an upgraded Gene Hackman. I just wish he was a memorable Lex Luthor, and I wish I had more to say about his performance as Lex Luthor. Compared to Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, his plan was more diabolical than Hackman's Luthor. Frank Langella as Perry White was just okay. Nothing special, but I don't really have much to say about him as Perry White that much. One thing I did like in this movie was Sam Huntington as Jimmy Olsen was good. He was funny and goofy. I wish he came back as Jimmy Olsen again. I will say that it was nice to see small cameos from the original Superman actors from the 1950s TV shows, seeing Noel Neill and Jack Larson. They originally wanted Christopher Reeve for a small cameo, but unfortunately died in 2004 before this movie came out. It's said that it could have been great to have him in for a small cameo in this movie as a tribute to the original Superman actor. One thing I like to point out that's funny to point out how Cal Penn from Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle and Taj from Van Wilder movies has a small part in this movie as one of Lex Luthor's side henchmen. Every time I see Cal Penn pop up in this movie, I was expecting someone to say, "Hey Kumar, when are we going to White Castle?" He's not the first person to come to mind to play a side henchman in a Superman movie. This movie is also too long at times. I feel like there were some scenes that could have been cut out and would not have affected the movie that much. So Superman Returns is a movie that I don't really hate. It's a movie I just have no interest or desire to go back to rewatch over and over again. There's nothing interesting or unique about it. It's just a tribute. It has nothing special to offer for me. So that was my review of Superman Returns, and stay tuned for Man of Steel. Also, stay tuned for my upcoming Batman reviews for the Tim Burton, Schumacher, and the Chris Nolan Batman movies, and the Zack Snyder films.